Hi everybody. Okay, so we've already talked about the rules for when to use commas. Now we're going to be talking about the rules for when to use semicolons. So let's take a look at the first rule. The first rule says that we would use a semicolon to separate independent clauses that are closely related but that aren't connected by a coordinating conjunction. And remember that our coordinating conjunctions are our fanboy words, so that would be for, and, nor, but, or yet. So let's take a look at the example that we have here to clarify a little bit. We have asked the professor his opinion, semicolon, he's an expert. So if you take a look here, we have two independent clauses, ask the professor his opinion and he's an expert, but they're not connected by a coordinating conjunction. Therefore, we would use a semicolon in between them. So let's take a look at the second reason that we would be using a semicolon. We would use a semicolon to connect two independent clauses, or between two independent clauses, that are connected by a coordinating conjunction, but that also contain other marks of punctuation. So if one of our independent clauses contains other marks of punctuation, it can sometimes get a little bit confusing, and that's why in that case we would use a semicolon to separate them instead of a comma like we might normally use when we have two independent clauses that are connected by a coordinating conjunction. Let's take a look at the example to help clarify this a little bit. We have my friends are great at pop trivia, semicolon, but unlike them, I am awful at it. So in this sentence, we have two independent clauses. My friends are great at pop trivia, and, but unlike them, I am awful at it. So if you look at the second independent clause, we have a parenthetical statement here that's separated by two commas. Now, like we had said before when we were talking about commas, normally when we have two independent clauses that are connected by a coordinated conjunction, we would use a comma before the but. But because this clause already has two commas in them, it might get a little confusing if I took this out. So therefore, when we have two independent clauses connected by a coordinating conjunction, but one of them already has punctuation marks in it like this, we would use a semicolon to in between them instead of a comma, just to avoid confusion. Now let's take a look at our third rule for when we would use semicolons. We would also use them between independent clauses that are connected by conjunctive adverbs. So if you take a look at my example, I have, I go to pub trivia nights with my friends, semicolon, however, I never know the answers. So in this case, we have however as our conjunctive adverb, and we always use a semicolon before a conjunctive adverb and after the first independent clause. Therefore, I go to pub trivia nights with my friends as our first independent clause. We would use the semicolon to in between the first independent clause and the conjunctive adverb, however. Let's take a look at our fourth rule for when we would use semicolons, and that would be prior to words that may introduce examples or a list. So let's take a look at our example. We have Thailand has some of the best food, semicolon, for example, Sam Tam, Tom Yum, and Gayam. Okay, so in this example, we're using our semicolon right before the words, for example, because the words for example are introducing our list. And last but not least, our fifth reason for when we would use a semicolon is to separate parts of a larger list. So let me use an example to explain this a little bit better. In this sentence, we have the winners of the contest were John, comma, age 7, semicolon, Jeffrey, comma, age 8, semicolon, and Jason, comma, age 7. Now, normally in a list, you would use commas to separate all of the things in the list, but because we have commas within the list pieces or within the categories of the list, we would use semicolons to separate those categories. So you can see here, John, age 7, is a category, and in each part of the category is separated by a comma. So therefore, to avoid confusion and tons of commas, we use semicolons to separate each part or each category in the list. So I hope that this helps to clarify when you would use a semicolon.